September 16th, 2025. Hey future me. I guess some people are placed in our paths without a clear purpose. Maybe just to show us what life could feel like with them. Maybe to teach us an important lesson. Maybe simply to remind us what human connection looks like. And before you know it, whether you knew them well or barely at all, whether you loved them, disliked them, or felt indifferent, they just disappear. And you can't help but wonder, maybe we could have been friends. Maybe he was the one. You can't help but hope that somehow your paths will cross again. But the truth is you might never see them again. Maybe they were just signposts along the way, not meant to stay, just meant to guide you forward, and you have to learn to accept that. I've met so many people in my life. Some of them were my best friends, others I loved with all my heart, and some I didn't really get along with. But no matter how I felt about them, no matter how many times we laughed together or how close we once were, today I don't even know where they are. I don't know what they're doing, who they're with, or how life has treated them. And sometimes I catch myself wondering, what if I could just say hi to them one more time? What if I could ask how they're doing, just once more? What if I could show them that I still care? Would life feel a little less lonely? Would they feel a little less lonely? Would I? But then it feels awkward, doesn't it? Because maybe what we had really belongs to the past, to a season of life, to a moment that can be recreated. And no matter how much I want that to be false, no matter how much I want to fight against it, I get scared. Scared of being the only one who still cares. Scared of being that person from middle school or high school or college who just can't seem to let go. So I do nothing. I smile. I move on. I pretend these thoughts are just passing shadows, not real feelings. But deep down I know the truth. They weren't just names on a class list or faces in a crowd. They were people I once loved. People who helped write a chapter of my life. And maybe I'll never get to say it to them again. But here's a letter that says it anyway. September 14th, 2025. Hey future me. Isn't it strange how sometimes you miss people? Friends, crushes, family, teachers. People you once knew, once loved, once spent hours with. And today it feels like they're strangers. Even though you feel the urge to reach out, to send a message, to talk to them, you hold back. Too scared that they don't feel the same. Too scared that you're alone in this. Too scared of silence and too scared of answers. And if they do answer, what then? Shouldn't the past stay where it is? What once was will never be again, right? That was then and this is now, right? I would love to reach out to a few people, to show them I cared, that I loved them, that they mattered, and that they still do, but I just don't. It breaks my heart. And yet, sometimes you really do have to let go. Because as much as you cherish the memories, as much as you treasure the feelings you once had, they do belong to the past, to a time, a place, a version of yourself that no longer exists. The truth is, you've both changed. You've grown into very different people with different principles, different dreams, different ways of seeing the world. And no matter how deeply you may still care, no matter how badly you want to make it work, you just don't click anymore. You don't match. Holding on too tightly might only bring hurt for you and for them. It might turn something that was once beautiful into something heavy, something painful. So maybe the kindest thing you can do, the bravest thing, is to leave the love where it belongs, in the past. Not forgotten, not erased, but honored. A part of your story that shaped who you are today. Here's a letter I wrote for those moments when letting go is the only way forward. September 2nd, 2025. Hey future me. Today I realized that sometimes, no matter how hard I try, I can't convince people of my principles. Some people just won't get me, nor why I do the things I do. And at the same time, I won't always understand them either. For the longest time, I thought we had to reach common ground. that we had to agree, otherwise it meant something was wrong. But today I understood that isn't always the case. There will be things I may never fully understand, and times when I'll never be fully understood. And sometimes the best thing to do is simply let go. And if it comes to it, walking separate ways can be the truest form of peace. Regardless of all the doubts, the heartbreaks, the moment of loneliness, all my life, whenever I felt this way, I told myself the same thing. Focus on what you can control. And for me, that was always work. And not just any work, but great work. I've always wanted to do great work. At 16, I found myself falling in love with Apple products. Not just the devices, but the design, the simplicity, the creativity that felt almost genius. I wanted to be a part of that, whatever that was. Then, as I grew a little older and got into med school, I started reading about breakthroughs in biology and genetics, discoveries like CRISPR-Cas9, a technology that could literally rewrite the genome. How incredible is that? To not just study the future, but to shape it. And yet, the most humbling part of it all was realizing that even as we learned how to edit DNA, we were still only scratching the surface of the most beautiful creation of all. That's when I knew life is bigger, much bigger than the routine of waking up, going to work, and falling asleep. There's so much more to uncover, so much more to build, so much more to give. And as I was working on this very episode, I couldn't help but think, yes, this is it. Great work. That is exactly what I want my life to be about. To create, to discover, to serve. To leave something behind that truly matters. Here's a letter I once wrote to myself when this desire first became clear. September 11th, 2025. Hey, future me. All I ever wanted was to be someone different. To create something exceptional. To discover things that no one did before me. To learn about science, about the little miracles that create this life of ours. To just be one of the greats. And the more I try, the more it feels impossible. The more I try, the more I realize my own shortcomings. How little I know, how little I understand. I don't know if I'll ever reach it, if I'll ever become it, if I'll ever achieve it. But I promise that I'll die trying. But to be honest, I really didn't know what great work meant. At least not to me, not yet, not right now. I could name people who had done great work. People whose names live on, whose creations or discoveries changed everything. But when it came to defining it for myself, I couldn't. I had vague ideas, of course. I thought great work has to include passion, almost obsession. It has to be beautiful. It has to blend creativity and technology, knowledge and discovery. It has to be rooted in science. But how? Why? Where? For a long time, I didn't have an answer. In the last year, though, something shifted. Things that once felt blurry began to take shape. Last year, medicine was just a question mark in the distance, even though I had studied 5 years. I wasn't sure if it belonged in the horizon of my life. But this year, something inside me settled. I started to see it more clearly. That great work could indeed be done in this profession. That being a doctor, serving, healing, learning, discovering could be not just a path, but my path. And with this realization, I wrote a letter, another letter to myself just a few days ago. September 12th, 2025. Hey, future me. I'm not settled yet. There are still so many things I don't know about myself, about my future, about the choices I'll one day have to make. But it feels like I'm slowly yet surely growing into you, slowly learning my own values, my own worth, my own dreams. I'm becoming more conscious, more aware of what I truly want and what I don't. And somehow that feels reassuring, like everything is, little by little, coming together. Now, what changed? Why, after such an incredibly hard year, one I truly suffered through, did I finally decide? I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it's just that the road was too long, and after a while I couldn't see the end of the tunnel anymore. I thought it might never end, and that right now I can see the end of the tunnel. At that stage, it felt like being stuck on an airplane during a 12-hour flight. The turbulence was so strong that I doubted I'd ever land in one piece. But now, as I look out the window and see the beautiful ground, the green fields stretching far below, I realize something. The journey was truly worth it. And those fields in my story, they're not just the everyday work of a doctor, they are bigger than that. To me, they represent medicine itself, the clinical work, the connection and communication with patients, as well as colleagues, the privilege of helping, the research, the future. So it's the lifestyle medicine, the preventive medicine, the curing medicine, everything about medicine. Honestly, I could say that I'm just in love with it these days, alhamdulillah. So now, even if still vaguely, I feel like I know where I want to settle. I can see the direction, even if the exact destination is still blurred. What remains is two things. To know where exactly I want to go, which I believe will take time, and by where exactly, I don't only mean the field and the specialty, but also the country, and I believe that this will take time. And the second thing is to learn how to do great work in it, which feels like something I can begin right now. And that's why in the first season we started with one of the best essays ever written on the subject, which is How to Do Great Work by Paul Graham. Because it just made sense. If we want to learn how to do great work, or at least glimpse what it might mean, we had to finish this essay together in this second season. And that's exactly what this episode is about. So let's dive in. The first lesson is about not relying on inspiration and motivation to do your work. Paul says, even when you've found something exciting to work on, working on it is not always straightforward. There will be times when some new ideas make you leap out of bed in the morning and get straight to work. But there will also be plenty of times when things aren't like that. And that is something only now can I understand, because when I was studying for medicine, it felt like hard work. It felt like I needed to wake up every day tired and not motivated to start the work. But then when I started content creation, I thought, this is what I want. This is the work I love to do. And at the beginning, it was simple for me to wake up motivated and want to do the content creation. But as time moved on, as I started doing more of that work, I felt like the motivation wasn't there anymore. Like, I had to force myself to go film something for the Instagram content. Although I do love every aspect of the work, there are just some aspects that are very hard to go through and very hard to start. And so, yes, I can definitely understand what he means by this. Let us continue. While you must work hard, it's possible to work too hard. And if you do that, you will find you get diminishing returns. Fatigue will make you stupid and eventually even damage your health. The point at which work yields diminishing returns depend on the type. Some of the hardest types you might only be able to do for 4 or 5 hours a day. It will probably be harder to start working than to keep working. You'll often have to trick yourself to get over that initial threshold. Don't worry about this. It's the nature of work, not a flaw in your character. Work has a sort of activation and energy, both per day and per project. When I'm reluctant to start work in the morning, I often trick myself by saying, I'll just read over what I've got so far. 5 minutes later, I've found something that seems mistaken or incomplete, and I'm off. The second lesson is about how hard work is often the result of spending an unreasonable amount of time on a single problem, and how it's also the result of consistency, showing up again and again, even when progress feels slow or invisible. He says, great work usually entails spending what would seem to most people an unreasonable amount of time on a problem. You can't think of this time as a cost or it will seem too high. You have to find the work sufficiently engaging as it's happening. There may be some jobs where you have to work diligently for years at things you hate before you get to the good part, but this is not how great work happens. Great work happens by focusing consistently on something you're genuinely interested in. When you pause to take stock, you're surprised how far you've come. The reason we're surprised is that we underestimate the cumulative effect of work. Writing a page doesn't sound like much, but if you do it every day, you'll write a book a year. That's the key, consistency. People who do great things don't get a lot done every day. They get something done rather than nothing. If you do work that compounds, you'll get exponential growth. Lesson 3 taught me that sometimes work happens when you're not working. Ideas, solutions, breakthroughs, they often arrive in the quiet moments when your mind isn't forced and when it's simply wandering. Paul Graham says, work doesn't just happen when you're trying to. There's a kind of undirected thinking you do when walking or taking a shower or lying in bed that can be very powerful. By letting your mind wander a little, you'll often solve problems you were unable to solve by frontal attack. You have to be working hard in the normal way to benefit from this phenomenon, though. You can't just walk around daydreaming. The daydreaming has to be interleaved with deliberate work that feeds it questions. Everyone knows to avoid distractions at work, but it's also important to avoid them in the other half of the cycle. When you let your mind wander, it wanders to whatever you care about most at the moment. So avoid the kind of distraction that pushes your work out of the top spot, or you'll waste this valuable type of thinking on the distraction instead. Exception, don't avoid, love. Lesson 4 reminded me of a quote by Norman Vincent Peale. Shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. Paul Graham says, consciously cultivate your taste in the work done in your field. Until you know which is the best and what makes it so, you don't know what you're aiming for. And that is what you're aiming for, because if you don't try to be the best, you won't even be good. Fortunately, there's a kind of economy of scale here. Though it might seem like you'd be taking on a heavy burden by trying to be the best, in practice you often end up net ahead. It's exciting and also strangely liberating. It simplifies things. In some ways, it's easier to try to be the best than to try merely to be good. One way to aim high is to try to make something that people will care about in 100 years. Not because their opinions matter more than your contemporaries, but because something that still seems good in 100 years is more likely to be genuinely good. And there are so many good examples right here, because most of the people that have done great work or that are trying to do great work have always had this tendency to try to create something that will matter in 100 of years. Take, for example, Henry Ford, who tried to make something that will stay and that will outlive him. Steve Jobs has done the same. As he was building Apple, he always said that he wanted to create a company that would outlive him. And as we can see, it has outlived its founder. And so, yeah, I guess that whatever we're trying to do, we should try to do, keeping in mind that it must or it should be around in a decade or 2 decades or 100 years, hopefully. Lesson 5 is about style and originality in work. Don't try to work in a distinctive style. Just try to do the best job you can. You won't be able to help doing it in a distinctive way. Style is doing things in a distinctive way without trying to. Trying to is affectation. Affectation is in effect to pretend that someone other than you is doing the work. You adopt an impressive but fake persona. And while you're pleased with the impressiveness, the fakeness is what shows in the work. How would you say what to be instead of what not to be? The best answer is earnest. The core of being earnest is being intellectually honest. One way to avoid intellectual dishonesty is to maintain a slight positive pressure in the opposite direction. Be aggressively willing to admit that you're mistaken. Once you've admitted you were mistaken about something, you're free. Till then, you have to carry it. Be the one who puts things out there rather than the one who sits back and offers sophisticated sounding criticisms of them. It's easy to criticize, is true in the most literal sense, and the route to great work is never easy. This reminds me of one of my high school teachers, and he used to tell us something in the way that it's easy to criticize in French, which was, La critique est aisée, mais l'art est difficile. As in, the art is difficult to do, and the criticizing part is easy. And so that was something that I've always kept in my mind, and that was one of the things that made me want to go into the making instead of the criticizing part. Anyways, Paul Graham says, I don't know if it's possible to cultivate originality, but there are definitely ways to make the most of however much you have. For example, you're much more likely to have original ideas when you're working on something. Original ideas don't come from trying to have original ideas. They come from trying to build or understand something slightly too difficult. Talking or writing about the things you're interested in is a good way to generate new ideas. Changing your context can help. If you visit a new place, you'll often find you have new ideas there. The journey itself often dislodges them. But you may not have to go far to get this benefit. Sometimes it's enough just to go for a walk. It also helps to travel in topic space. You'll have more new ideas if you explore lots of different topics. Partly because it gives the angle grinder more surface area to work on, and partly because analogies are an especially fruitful source of new ideas. Don't divide your attention evenly between many topics though, or you'll spread yourself too thin. You want to distribute it according to something more like a power law. Be professionally curious about a few topics and idly curious about many more. Very close to that is the concept of copying. People new to a field will often copy existing work. There's nothing inherently bad about that. There's no better way to learn how something works than by trying to reproduce it. Nor does copying necessarily make your work unoriginal. Originality is the presence of new ideas, not the absence of old ones. There's a good way to copy and a bad way. If you're going to copy something, do it openly instead of furtively, or worse still, unconsciously. This is what's meant by the famously misattributed phrase, great artists steal. The really dangerous kind of copying, the kind that gives copying a bad name, is the kind that's done without realizing it. Because you're nothing more than a train running on tracks laid down by someone else. New discoveries often have to be conceived initially as variations of existing things even by their discoverers, because there isn't yet the conceptual vocabulary to express them. One of the most powerful kinds of copying is to copy something from one field into another. History is so full of chance discoveries of this type that it's probably worth giving chance a hand by deliberately learning about other kinds of work. You can take ideas from quite distant fields if you let them be metaphors. Lesson 6 is about optimism and its importance in doing great work. There may be some jobs where it's an advantage to be cynical and pessimistic. But if you want to do great work, it's an advantage to be optimistic, even though that means you'll risk looking like a fool sometimes. There's an old tradition of doing the opposite. It's better to keep quiet lest you look like a fool, but that's advice for seeming smart. If you actually want to discover new things, it's better to take the risk of telling people your ideas. Husband your morale. It's the basis of everything when you're working on ambitious projects. You have to nurture and protect it like a living organism. Morale starts with your view of life. You're more likely to do great work if you're an optimist, and more likely to if you think of yourself as lucky than if you think of yourself as a victim. One of the biggest mistakes ambitious people make is to allow setbacks to destroy their morale all at once. Doing great work is a depth-first search. So this is an AI concept, and I really invite you to look it up in YouTube. Doing great work is a depth-first search. So if at first you don't succeed, try again isn't quite right. It should be, if at first you don't succeed, either try again or backtrack and then try again. Never give up is also not quite right. Obviously, there are times when it's the right choice to eject. A more precise version would be never let setback panic you into backtracking more than you need to. Corollary, never abandon the root node. This reminds me of episode 10, the episode about Nike's founder, Phil Knight. If you've listened to episode 10, you might remember what he says. And those who urge entrepreneurs to never give up, charlatans. Sometimes you have to give up. Sometimes knowing when to give up, when to try something else is genius. Giving up doesn't mean stopping. Don't ever stop. Paul Graham continues, it's not necessarily a bad sign if work is a struggle any more than it's a bad sign to be out of breath while running. It depends how fast you're running. So learn to distinguish good pain from bad. Good pain is a sign of effort. Bad pain is a sign of damage. An audience is a critical component of morale. To the extent you can, avoid letting intermediaries come between you and your audience. In some types of work, this is inevitable. But it's so liberating to escape it that you might be better off switching to an adjacent type if that will let you go direct. The people you spend time with will also have a big effect on your morale. You'll find there are some who increase your energy and others who decrease it. And the effect someone has is not always what you'd expect. Seek out the people who increase your energy and avoid those who decrease it. Don't marry someone who doesn't understand that you need to work or sees your work as competition for your attention. If you're ambitious, you need to work. It's almost like a medical condition. So someone who won't let you work either doesn't understand you or does and doesn't care. Ultimately, morale is physical. You think with your body, so it's important to take care of it. That means exercising, eating, and sleeping well, and avoiding the more dangerous kinds of drugs. Running and walking are particularly good forms of exercise because they're good for thinking. People who do great work are not necessarily happier than everyone else, but they're happier than they'd be if they didn't. In fact, if you're smart and ambitious, it's dangerous not to be productive. People who are smart and ambitious but don't achieve much tend to become bitter. Let us go to lesson 7, which is about the importance of discarding and cutting. Great work isn't just about what you add, it's about what you take away. Paul Graham says, you may have to throw things away and redo them. You won't necessarily have to, but you have to be willing to. And that can take some effort. When there's something you need to redo, status quo bias and laziness will combine to keep you in denial about it. To beat this, ask, if I'd already made the change, would I want to revert to what I have now? Have the confidence to cut. Don't keep something that doesn't fit just because you're proud of it or because it cost you a lot of effort. Indeed, in some kinds of work, it's good to strip whatever you're doing to its essence. The result will be more concentrated. You'll understand it better and you won't be able to lie to yourself about whether there's anything real there. So I have done some of this discarding, cutting myself in a lot of this podcast, in a lot of the videos and Instagram reels that I made. There have been some times where I've filmed entire reels, like 2 or 3 reels, and didn't post them. And there was a time where I recorded an entire podcast episode and didn't post it because of this, because I wanted to make something good. But I feel like someone has to find a balance here, because if you discard too much, if you cut too much, if you try to make it perfect too much, you won't make anything. And so sometimes I do feel like it would be better not to post something. But if I don't post, well, then I don't post, you know? And so I guess there's a balance to find here. And it's difficult to find most of the time, but yeah, that's my point of view. And this actually also reminds me of something I once read in Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk, and also in an episode of David Senra's founder podcast about it. It's what Musk calls his algorithm. 5 commandments he applied to every business he builds. The first is simple yet profound: question every requirement. But the one that matters most for us here is the second, which is delete any part of the process you can. Musk puts it this way: you have to add them back later. In fact, if you don't end up adding back at least 10%, you didn't delete enough. And if you're curious about the rest of the algorithm, it's just as sharp, actually. The third one is simplify and organize. The fourth one is accelerate cycle time. And the fifth one is automate. Each step is about cutting the unnecessary, getting closer to the essence, and moving faster towards what matters. Anyways, lesson 8 from this essay by Paul Graham is about this surprising truth. So much of the best work isn't about creating something new. It's about discovering what was already there. Paul Graham says, some of the very best work will seem like it took comparatively little effort because it was in a sense already there. It didn't have to be built, just seen. It's a very good sign when it's hard to say whether you're creating something or discovering in it. When you're doing great work that could be seen as either creation or discovery, err on the side of discovery. Try thinking of yourself as a mere conduit through which the ideas take their natural shape. Similarly, if you're trying to build a powerful tool, make it gratuitously unrestrictive. A powerful tool, almost by definition, will be used in ways you didn't expect. So err on the side of eliminating restrictions, even if you don't know what the benefit will be. Great work will often be tool-like in the sense of being something others build on, so it's a good sign if you're creating ideas that others could use, or exposing questions that others could answer. The best ideas have implications in many different areas. If you express your ideas in the most general form, they'll be truer than you intended. Lesson 9 is about choosing problems. Unfashionable problems are undervalued. One of the most interesting kinds of unfashionable problems is the problem that people think has been fully explored, but hasn't. Great work often takes something that already exists and shows its latent potential. Durer and Watt both did this. So if you're interested in a field that others think is tapped out, don't let their skepticism deter you. People are often wrong about this. Working on an unfashionable problem can be very pleasing. There's no hype or hurry. Opportunists and critics are both occupied elsewhere. The existing work often has an old-school solidity, and there's a satisfying sense of economy in cultivating ideas that would otherwise be wasted. People think big ideas are answers, but often the real insight was in the question. Unanswered question can be uncomfortable things to carry around with you. But the more you're carrying, the greater the chance of noticing a solution. Or perhaps even more excitingly, noticing that two unanswered questions are the same. Sometimes you carry a question for a long time. Great work often comes from returning to a question you first noticed years before, in your childhood even, and couldn't stop thinking about. People talk a lot about the importance of keeping your youthful dreams alive, but it's just as important to keep your youthful questions alive. Lesson 10 is about the simplest and sometimes the hardest way to learn, by doing. Though it sounds more responsible to begin by studying everything that's been done before, you'll learn faster and have more fun by trying stuff. And you'll understand previous work better when you do look at it. So err on the side of starting, which is easier when starting means starting small. These two ideas fit together like two puzzle pieces. How do you get from starting small to doing something great? By making successive versions. Great things are almost always made in successive versions. You start with something small and evolve it. And the final version is both cleverer and more ambitious than anything you could have planned. It's particularly useful to make successive versions when you're making something for people, to get an initial version in front of them quickly and then evolve it based on the response. Begin by trying the simplest thing that could possibly work. Surprisingly often it does. If it doesn't, this will at least get you started. Don't try to cram too much new stuff into any one version. Take as much risk as you can afford. In an efficient market, risk is proportionate to reward. So don't look for certainty, but for a bet with high expected value. If you're not failing occasionally, you're probably being too conservative. Lesson 11 is about surrounding yourself with the best. Seek out the best colleagues. There are a lot of projects that can be done alone. And even if you're working on one that can be, it's good to have other people to encourage you and to bounce ideas off. Colleagues don't just affect your work though, they also affect you. So work with people you want to become like, because you will. Quality is more than quantity in colleagues. It's better to have one or two great ones than a building full of pretty good ones. In fact, it's not merely better, but necessary, judging from history. The degree to which great work happens in clusters suggests that one's colleagues often make the difference between doing great work and not. How do you know when you have sufficiently good colleagues? In my experience, when you do, you know. Which means if you're unsure, you probably don't. But it may be possible to give a more concrete answer than that. Here's an attempt. Sufficiently good colleagues offer surprising insights. They can see and do things that you can't. So if you have a handful of colleagues good enough to keep you on your toes in this sense, you're probably over the threshold. Lesson 12, and the final lesson, is about impressing people and competing with them. It's okay to want to impress other people, but choose the right people. The opinion of people you respect is signal. Fame, which is the opinion of a much larger group you might or might not respect, just adds noise. The prestige of a type of work is at best a trailing indicator and sometimes completely mistaken. If you do anything well enough, you'll make it prestigious. So the question to ask about a type of work is not how much prestige it has, but how well it could be done. Competition can be an effective motivator, but don't let it choose the problem for you. Don't let yourself get drawn into chasing something just because others are. In fact, don't let competitors make you do anything much more specific than work harder. So that was a couple of lessons that I've learned from Paul Graham's essay, How to Do Great Work. And speaking of great work, I'd love to end this episode with a letter about this. September 20th, 2025. Hey, future me. I've been carrying some fears for a while. Fears of everyday things. Fears of starting, of letting go, of acting in ways I wasn't used to. I told myself I wasn't ready enough, not comfortable enough. But then the moment came. The time to start. The time to let go. The time to act. And no matter how unready I felt, no matter how uncertain I was, I did it. Because life left me no other choice. So today I decided that whatever is coming my way, whether I feel ready or not, I am ready. So that is where I'll leave it. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast or YouTube channel, I'd really appreciate it if you did. Your support goes a long way in motivating me to keep chasing my hero and sharing this journey with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take care and keep chasing your hero.